Your Olympic hero has arrived. It's true, it's true.
You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to yet another Top 10 video. Today I'll be talking about a topic I've talked about very little on this channel, but I have occasionally brought it up, and that is wrestling. Wrestling was a huge part of my childhood, and it's something I still enjoy to this day. Specifically, I enjoy going back to the older matches, because I don't really like modern WWE. A lot of that's because I don't really recognize most of the people that actually wrestle now, as well as the fact that it's gone completely PG, whereas the Attitude Era was really my favorite era of wrestling. Maybe I'll do another video later on talking about why I love wrestling so much, but before anyone says it, yes, I know it's fake, but that's part of the fun. See, the thing is although the fights themselves are staged and fake, the storylines are what make me love wrestling. The storylines are really fucking crazy and outlandish, and it's really something you don't get anywhere else. The types of storylines you get in wrestling are just so unique to wrestling. When I was younger, I did believe it was real, obviously, because I was a kid, I was stupid. Obviously, I later found out it wasn't and stopped watching it for a while. But then got back into watching some of the classic stuff, because again, it's about the storylines. And here's the thing, even though the fights themselves are fakes, they can be choreographed really good and look pretty real. And the thing is some of the injuries themselves are actually real, because you still gotta be pretty athletic to go out and wrestle. And some matches, you know, the actual stuff that's going on was, at least to some extent, real. Like, obviously it was all pre-planned, but, you know, like falling off the top of a cage, or getting power-bombed into a pile of thumbtacks, things like that are not fakeable, even though they are part of the script. So without further ado, let's get to number 10. Number 10 is Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant is one of the OG wrestlers from like the 70s and 80s. My first exposure to him was through The Princess Bride, which is a fantastic movie. If you've never seen it, you're definitely missing out. But his matches are iconic. His most iconic match is obviously WrestleMania 3 going up against Hulk Hogan. But I really like a lot of the other stuff he's done as well. For instance, he boxed with Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon is the only man to have both boxed Andre the Giant and wrestled Muhammad Ali. It's pretty interesting. Andre the Giant was known because of his size. He was a huge guy. You know, he was massively tall, massively big, and he could squish you if he wanted to. But he was a big sweetheart at heart. Like, from all the interviews and stuff I've seen of him, the actual man, Andre the Giant, was the sweetest guy ever. And I think that contrast between the character and the persona was really interesting. Like, granted, the persona went back and forth between being heel and face. And for those of you unfamiliar with wrestling terms, heel and face are ways of saying villain and hero. Heel is villain, face is like hero. Andre the Giant was part of a different era of wrestling where it was very much about making it seem like a legitimate sport rather than crazy gimmicks. And I do have a lot of respect for those older eras where they tried to make it seem like a legitimate sport. However, I will say I do personally prefer the more gimmicky stuff of the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression eras. Alright, now moving on to number 9. Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret Hart is one of the more agile wrestlers. You know, he's more of a high flyer submission guy. Like, his key move was the sharpshooter, which is a leg lock that usually ends in submission. Bret Hart himself was always entertaining for me to watch. He wore that bright pink outfit, and then he had his brother Owen Hart, who was there with him before Owen Hart passed away during an unfortunate accident. Bret Hart was fun to watch with those really, like, colorful outfits, the very over-the-top personality, which you see in a lot of wrestlers, and overall, he was just an enjoyable guy to watch. His submission moves were really good, and he did get fucked over in the Montreal Screwjob, where Vince McMahon told him, you know, oh, you're supposed to win this match, but because Bret was leaving the company, Vince McMahon actually had him lose the match without telling him. But yeah, moving swiftly on to number 8, we have Triple H, also known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, or The Game. The thing about Triple H is his persona has gone through several radical changes. First off, Triple H originally appeared as like this snooty British royalty type character, like this aristocrat. You know, he was Triple H, like he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley of the Helmsley dynasty, essentially. A lot of that was about, you know, like that's why his special move is called the pedigree, because, you know, he's purebred. Eventually that angle didn't work, so they kind of spiced it up with, you know, The Game and DX. DX was the whole, like, anti-authority, anti-establishment thing with Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and later on a few other people joined. And, you know, during the DX era, I think is when Triple H was at his best. DX's whole thing was going out and telling everyone to suck it, which was, like, a big thing to say on TV at the time. Like, it was controversial to tell people to suck it live on TV. But that's what he did, and he had the whole crotch cross, where he did the thing with his hands going over his crotch. It was a very vulgar and entertaining character to watch. On top of that, Triple H now runs a lot of the company. He's like the executive vice president of WWE now. And he's also Vince McMahon's son-in-law, Vince McMahon, of course, being the chairman and owner of the company. And while Triple H doesn't really wrestle anymore, he's still a major part of the company. Alright, number 7, The Rock. Now, The Rock originally debuted as Rocky Maivia, who was a very generic and boring character that nobody liked. And because of that, they changed it to where he became a douche. And that is what actually made him likable. They made The Rock a character who came out and basically told the fans to go fuck themselves because they didn't accept him for who he was before. Because all the signs that the fans had that said, die, Rocky, die, there's actually this whole big speech he's giving about those signs. And basically, The Rock was like, the douchey, narcissistic, over-the-top ego, and turned him into a heel, which ironically made him much more popular than he was as a face. Of course, later on he would turn face again, but the whole narcissistic, ego, cocky, full of himself persona always stuck, and that's what made The Rock so entertaining. Not to mention, The Rock arguably has the most successful film career out of any WWE superstar. The Rock is still starring in movies to this day. He's much more of just a celebrity than actually just being a wrestler anymore. And I do constantly reference The Rock's signature move, the People's Elbow. Whenever I talk about, giving something an elbow drop, I always say I'm going to give it the People's Elbow, if I want to, smash something or something like that. So it's kind of an expression I use based on The Rock's special move. But The Rock was always fun to watch. It was really entertaining in that really bad Doom movie. That movie was really fun. It was stupid and it was bad, but it was a fun movie. And The Rock definitely was a large part of that. Alright, now on to number 6, Vince McMahon himself, Mr. McMahon. Mr. McMahon is my favorite heel of all time, easily my favorite wrestling villain. Nothing ever comes close. The reason for that is because Vince McMahon, he's the one writing the storylines, and he makes himself just the most despicable piece of shit there is, and that's what makes it so endearing. He's writing himself as this degenerate, pervert, heartless businessman, and it's just really enjoyable as a villain. He's almost always the villain. He has very rarely, if ever, been appeared as a face. And there's just something so endearing about how evil he writes himself. That's what makes him so enjoyable to watch. I do tend to really like heels. Like I said, I do think I tend to favor heels over faces a lot of the time, in all honesty. And Mr. McMahon is no exception to that. He is easily my favorite heel. Obviously, there's still people above him, but that's because, they're favorites of mine regardless of being face or heel. Vince McMahon, easily the best heel of all time. He wouldn't really work as a face, though. Because he's cowardly, he's vicious, he's sadistic, he's perverted, he's manipulative, he's a liar, and it's so entertaining to watch. I love Mr. McMahon as a character. He literally makes his employees kiss his ass. He makes Trish Stratus take off her clothes and bark like a dog. There's just something so enjoyable about just how evil Mr. McMahon as a character is. Alright, number 5, we have Kane. Now, Kane is primarily a heel as well, but Kane is very enjoyable because of his storylines with The Undertaker. Because obviously, if there was no Undertaker, there would be no Kane. Because Kane is The Undertaker's storyline brother, and Kane and The Undertaker have both gone back and forth between being heel and face. But Kane, is the big red monster, he's this big demonic force to be reckoned with that, basically comes up from the bowels of hell and fucks shit up. The whole storyline behind Kane was that, he burned down his family's funeral parlor, killing his parents and wounding himself. And then you later find out he was the illegitimate son of Paul Bearer and, all this crazy soap opera shit, which is why I love wrestling so much, is the crazy soap opera shit. It's so enjoyable. Kane's storyline is a large part of that. I love Kane as a character. He was also in this horror movie called See No Evil, which was really bad, but it was fun. And I definitely think Masked Kane was way better than Unmasked Kane. Unmasked Kane was just not as good as Masked Kane, in my opinion, by a lot. And I'd say most people tend to agree that when he took the mask off, it was definitely maybe not the best of move for the character. But ultimately, I do like Unmasked Kane too, so he's still enjoyable. All right, number 4, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is the man who made the Attitude Era what it was. Stone Cold Steve Austin was a guy who would come in and beat up his boss on a regular basis, because the Austin-McMahon feud is the most iconic feud of the Attitude Era. But Stone Cold epitomized everything about the Attitude Era. He was edgy, he was rebellious, he was over the top, he didn't take shit from anybody, and that's what made the Attitude Era work so well. Stone Cold was a large part of what made that work. And there's something just so charming about it. Over-the-top, beer-drinking, redneck who curses, beats up his boss, doesn't take shit from anybody, does whatever the hell he wants, and that's what you just gotta deal with. And just the crazy lengths he went to in the McMahon feud are really what sells him so well. Dumping the concrete in Vince McMahon's car, disguising himself as a nurse and attacking him in the hospital. All this great, crazy shit came from the Stone Cold storyline that's just unforgettable. Alright, for number 3 we have Mick Foley. Now Mick Foley sets himself apart in just how much physical abuse he put himself through. Like, a lot of the injuries Mick Foley sustains in the ring were real, and he just kept coming back for fucking more, and people would pay more and more to see this guy get hurt. Hell in a Cell, Mick Foley versus The Undertaker is my favorite match of all time. He gets thrown off the top of the cage, climbs back up, gets driven through the top of the cage, his tooth gets pushed through his fucking lip, and he still comes back, lays out a pile of thumbtacks in the ring, and then gets fucking powerbombed into them. How can you compete with that fucking insanity? And this is all real, too. This actually all happened. And then the other thing with Mick Foley is he lost his ear in a match against Vader, right? His ear got caught in the ropes and got torn off. And he had the choice to go to the hospital and get his ear sewn on, which would cause him to miss a pay-per-view event, or go to the pay-per-view event and not have an ear. And he's just like, fuck it, I don't need an ear, let's go to the match. What kind of fucking crazy person do you have to be Mick Foley? Mad respect for him. This man was the reason they created the hardcore title, and there's a good reason for that. Mick Foley is fucking insane, and I love the hell out of him for it. Alright, number 2, we have Hulk Hogan. It was pretty obvious Hulk Hogan would be on this list if you've seen my Sergeant Friends series, or if you've heard me talk about Hulk Hogan movies. Because, you know, Good Brother, the character in Sergeant Friends, is obviously very heavily based on Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan had his whole persona about being all American, which is all fun and cheesy, and he's very over the top. I think the biggest reason I like Hulk Hogan is because of his over-the-top reactions to everything, and his, you know, shouting, and just the weird faces he makes, and just the fun storylines he had. Hulk Hogan is usually a face. There's been a couple of times he was heel, like when he was Hollywood Hogan, and that worked really well too, although I do think I prefer face Hulk Hogan over heel Hollywood Hogan. Not to mention, I love Hulk Hogan movies. He's easily my favorite WWE actor. Like I say, The Rock is the most successful, but there's just a certain charm about the cheesiness of Hulk Hogan's movies he's appeared in. You know, Suburban Commando, Santa with Muscles, Mr. Nanny, all great movies, for their own reasons. The Secret Agent Club was terrible, and Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain was okay. I still need to see a few others, like, there's that one, I think it's called No Holds Barred. I still need to see that one. But Hulk Hogan, very fun, very cheesy, very American. You know, his whole intro is, you know, I am a real American, you know, that whole thing. Very fun, very, you know, cheesy and reminiscent of the time he was created. Because Hulk Hogan, you know, he started in, like, the 80s and then carried on for, like, ever. Hulk Hogan still wants to do another match. He wants to do one last match, which he's been heavily advised not to do because it could kill him. Because he's, like, 70-something. But I'm not gonna lie, if he does it, I'd watch it, because I respect the hell out of Hulk Hogan as a performer, and I've always enjoyed his work. A lot of people don't like that match at WrestleMania 2, where he was in the steel cage. I love that match. I don't know why people don't like it. The one where he fought King Kong Bundy? I love that match. And I do think a large part of that is because Elvira was one of the fucking announcers on it. Like, that was very entertaining. Like, I don't know how that came to pass, but it was fun. And of course, there's his iconic fight against Andre the Giant, which actually wasn't his first fight with Andre the Giant. Just the first one isn't part of the kayfabe storyline, because that match just kind of ended with, like, disqualification or just walking out. I can't remember which. It was a really old one. But then the famous body slam one is obviously more iconic, where he picked up Andre and threw him on the ground. I also did enjoy that reality show, Hogan Knows Best. As cheesy and stupid as it was fun to watch. Not to mention, Hulk Hogan had his own short-lived pasta restaurant called Pastamania, and that is the best thing ever. So there's no reason Hulk Hogan wouldn't be on this list. Hulk Hogan is an American hero. End of story. Alright, now we're on to number 1, which, if you've been keeping up with a lot of my stuff, then you probably already know who it is if you're fairly familiar with me. But if not, it's The Undertaker. The Undertaker is my favorite wrestler of all time, because he's, number 1, been wrestling for so long. It's just so respectable that he just kept going at it, even when he was way past his prime. But in addition to that, The Undertaker has a lot of actual athletic skill, and his wrestling style is very entertaining to watch. But on top of that, he was a gimmick, and that gimmick worked. The Undertaker, you know, has this crazy storyline where he's gone back and forth from being alive, dead, undead, coming back, being heel, face. It's nuts, and I love it. There's the whole storyline with Kane. There's the fact that the two of them can, like, shoot fireballs and shit out of their hands and do all sorts of weird supernatural stuff. There was the urn that gave him his mystical dark powers. Just overall, nothing compares to The Undertaker, in my opinion. Not only has he wrestled for so long, he's always been loyal to the company, because when he tried to wrestle for WCW, they basically told him no one will pay to see you wrestle. And then when he joined WWE and they gave him a chance and he rose to the top, he never left WWE. He had the chance to jump ship during the Monday Night Wars, and he refused to do it because he remembered that WCW fucked him over. But just the insane supernatural storyline and the great storytelling, in all honesty, as cheesy as it is, it's a good story. I love the Undertaker story. The thing is, the Undertaker is set up as sort of this slasher villain type character, where he's unstoppable. You can't take him down. He's indestructible. So it takes 10 men to take him down. It's nuts, and I love it. There's like a sit-up thing that he does in the middle of the ring where he shoots up just like Michael Myers, and that's where he actually took it, was from Halloween. And again, he's very heavily inspired by slasher villains. He's a man of very few words during most of his personas. He does talk in all of them, but he was always a man of few words until he got to the American Badass phase. That's when he got a lot more trash talky and was a lot more like his actual, his actual personality, which was fine. I liked the American Badass phase. It was fun. I grew up with it too, obviously. I'd say my favorite is either the Phenom or the Dead Man or possibly the Prince of Darkness. The Prince of Darkness is pretty cool. The Prince of Darkness was a super heel who ran this like creepy satanic cult where he was like this satanic figure, and he had like this big like crucifix that he'd put people on and like kill them and then convert them to his own zombie slaves and shit. It was fucking cool. The Undertaker has gone through so many personas, died so many times in storyline, and come back so many times in storyline. He had that whole angle of The Undertaker versus The Undertaker, which a lot of people don't like, but I thought that one was kind of fun. Like, it was stupid, I'll admit that. It was fairly stupid, but it was fun. But obviously, with The Undertaker, Kane was a major part of the storyline that sold it, and made it so enjoyable. And without Kane, The Undertaker wouldn't have been as, like, great as he was. So I do think that that's a large part of it, too. And, he actually did appear in a movie, too. He was in Suburban Commando as, like, the antagonist, as one of the bounty hunters hunting down Hulk Hogan's character. And the thing about The Undertaker is he used to never break kayfabe. If you don't know what kayfabe means, kayfabe is like the illusion of the storyline being real. And Undertaker never broke kayfabe. He was always part of the storyline. There were several times when, like, they would try to get him to smile or do something stupid, and he just wouldn't, because he was so dedicated to his work. And that's respectable. His real send-off was his second WrestleMania loss. Unfortunately, like, I honestly think they should just let him have the streak or had, like, one final loss be the end. But his second loss was the end of his real storyline. He still makes occasional appearances, but I do think that the streak was a large part of the character, and I do think it's sad that it ended the way it did. But yeah, The Undertaker's getting on up there in years, but he's still a part of the company. He doesn't appear anywhere near as much as he used to, but I love The Undertaker, and he's easily my favorite wrestler. Nothing comes close. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one.
The Rock smells what you're cooking.
Pancakes, Brock! Pancakes!
If you really like it, subscribe.